Welcome to MKE ARTS Live. Today's theme is Stories from the Stage, and I have the great pleasure of introducing a storyteller, Megan McGee. She's the executive director of Ex Fabula, which is a group in Milwaukee committed to strengthening community bonds through the art of storytelling. They celebrate the power of true and personal stories, and Megan helps facilitate hundreds of people telling stories on stage. Often doesn't get to tell stories herself, so I'm excited to hear from Megan telling a story. Take it away, Megan.
Thanks. It was January of maybe 2017, and I was on stage at Alverno College's Pittman Theater. I was the MC of an event where community members were telling true stories on the theme, Our Little Secret, and I was reading ultra shorts. That's an Ex Fabula format where audience members write a few lines on a slip of paper, and the MCs read those true stories on the stage. So we were just going into intermission. I was up there with my co-MC, Tiffany Miller, and I said, okay, I just have one more ultra short before we go into intermission. And I read this ultra short that was about a woman who was saying that her secret had to do with being pregnant. And at the end of the ultra short, I said, this one's anonymous, there's no name written on there. But of course, I would recognize my own handwriting anywhere. At that moment, Tiffany kind of realized what was happening. A couple of people in the audience realized, oh my gosh, she just announced she's pregnant. Tiffany screams, hugs me. People in the audience, there's this hubbub going. Oh my gosh, did she? Yes, she did. It was a totally joyous moment on stage, sharing this true story, the secret I'd been carrying with me. And I was so excited to share it with some friends and a couple hundred strangers as well. Now, I've shared those joyous stories on stage, but I have also shared the flip side, those moments of pain. Specifically, I'm thinking of a story I've told about a miscarriage that I had back in 2015. Now, after the miscarriage, it was a few months before I really felt ready to share the story. And even when I felt ready, I wasn't really ready. I just felt very compelled to share it for a couple of reasons. One, the miscarriage itself, I think for me, I was surprised at how affected I was by it. I thought I would just kind of, all right, on to the next try, but I was devastated. And I think that was partly because I wasn't used to being silent about my experiences. It was a story I didn't feel comfortable telling, and I couldn't quite wrap my mind around why. What was the shame I felt? What was the fear? Why did I feel I needed to bury this horrible secret? The second reason I needed to tell the story was because actually the stories of other people were one of the things that was most healing for me. A good friend of mine, Jonathan, posted on Facebook that he and his wife had a miscarriage. And I remember he said, we're going to be fine. We just want you to know we thank you in advance for your love and understanding, and we're going to go get sushi and martinis now and then heal. And I thought, he just put it out there like that? Can I do that? Can I just be as brave with my truth? Well, and the third reason is, I do work for a storytelling organization, so it's a little bit hypocritical for me to be telling people, yes, put your truth out there, be vulnerable, and then not do it myself with an incredibly significant event in my life. So I was determined to tell this story, and the opportunity came up for me to tell it when there's a traveling podcast that came to town, and I said, oh, okay, here we go, let's submit, and they accepted, and so I was going to go tell this story. So a couple days before the actual storytelling event, the story changed. You see, personal stories aren't exactly scripted theater. They're not exactly improv. Sometimes there's some weird middle-of-the-road performance art. Because a couple weeks before I was going to tell my story, I found out I was pregnant again. Okay, I talked to the coach and I reworked the ending. Nice little twist. I got this. We're going to go. Then I get to 4 days before the event. I'm getting ready to tell. I'm glowing because of the pregnancy, and then I started to bleed. Not just spotting. I go online. There's clumps. Something is wrong. And my mind flashes back to the miscarriage I'd previously had, and I'm imagining the worst. I'm remembering being in the ultrasound room and having the doctors tell me that the baby did not have a heartbeat. And I'm fearing it's all going to happen, and I'm going to be on the stage in a couple days, and there's nothing to stop this. And I kind of want to bail, but there's no way to do that, right? So I go on stage, and I tell my full truth as I am living it. And frankly, I feel like I may have even blacked out a bit during the whole thing because I don't remember the event itself. I just know that when I walked off stage and immediately started bawling, the MC met me at the end of the stage as the audience applauded and wrapped me in a hug, a long hug, the perfect hug at that moment. And then people came up to me in the audience and they gave me kind words and they let me know about their own experiences. And I received an email the next day from one of the other storytellers saying that she thought I was really brave and saying, you know, if you want to become a parent, there are many paths, and I know you will find one. If you really, really want to be a parent, you will. And it was so heartening to hear that. Even about 3 weeks ago, I met someone, and she said, you know, I think I saw you tell a story on stage at the Collectivo back room. Wow, she still remembers. You never know who's in the audience who's hearing what you need to hear, or what they need to hear in that moment. So these days, I am helping a lot of other people tell their stories. And sometimes I like to think of myself as maybe even a midwife for stories, because sometimes the stories that are the hardest to tell, they're also the ones that really need to come out. And it's tricky at the time, and maybe you're nervous as hell, but afterward, people connect with you. And you have that validation that, yes, it's worth it to be vulnerable. It's worth it to put yourself out there. So when people are in that moment, I tell them, go ahead, I'm your midwife. Squeeze my hand, scream a little if you need, but you're going to get through this, and you're going to be better afterward for having taken the risk. Trust me, I have been there. Thank you.
Thanks again, Megan. And actually, I think I see your daughter watching us right there. Out there. So another happy ending to that story. Welcome again to MKE Arts Live. Megan is from Ex Fabula. They're entering their 10th season this fall, so you can learn more about that on exfabula.org. I am Adam Carr, the host of the show. We bring this on this stage. We introduce the incredible people, artists, performers in Milwaukee, and today our focus really will be on stories. And Frank Almond is up with me on stage. I have a little bit more business to get to before we get to Frank, but he's a good-looking man. You can look at him instead of me if you find this tedious. But so MKE Arts Live is made possible by 88.9, Epic Creative, and the United Performing Arts Fund. Their 15-week campaign is ending this Wednesday, and they're having a celebration at Potawatomi. Michael Tucker and Jill Eikenberry from LA Law will be there, and you can learn more about that on UPAF.org. So for an episode on Stories from the Stage, one of the best stories in the history of humanity regarding the arts happens to have been written in Milwaukee. And in case you think I'm being hyperbolic, we can learn more about it from Frank. So Frank, welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry I'm here in a way, but
absolutely.
Just because of the story, but
absolutely. So you're the concert master.
I'm not really sorry.
You're the concert master of the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, the artistic director at Franklin Music, and you're a soloist and chamber musician. And you facilitate a lot of that with a very special instrument.
Yeah.
Will you tell us just a little bit about that instrument?
Yes, I usually play on a violin that was made by Antonio Stradivari in 1715. It's probably one of the greatest violins in the world. Absolutely. And I sort of pinch myself every day when I am able to play it. So.
For sure, and it's older. That instrument's older than Milwaukee, and its value is greater than the net worth of most Milwaukeeans. Probably more than most Milwaukeeans will make in their lifetime.
It's worth a lot. Although, absolutely. Yeah, we don't ever talk about that, but it's up there. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I wanted to be a little vague.
Yeah.
And so let's go to the evening of January 2014, a little over 4 years ago, in Wisconsin Lutheran College. Mm-hmm. So what was happening that night?
We had a really good concert on a series that I run, and played the concert. It was a little bit longer than usual. Went to a reception at the venue, and kind of did the normal routine, and exited the stage door where it was about 9 degrees below zero outside. It was really cold. Even for here, it was really cold. I was really happy because my car was parked really close to the stage door. And you know, it kind of went from there. I was going to my car and, you know, it's the usual thing. Somebody shot me with a taser and stole the instrument.
There's a lot of interesting details in the story. One of the details I spent some time thinking about is you weren't wearing, I felt like a little motherly towards you. You were wearing a really thin jacket that night.
I was, yeah.
What's up with that?
It was, I know, I feel like I should get an endorsement from North Face or something because it was one of those little thin slit things, and the only reason I was wearing that was because I was able to park so close. And all I was doing was getting out of the car and going into the hall and coming back to the car. And the idea is, with an instrument like that, to try not to keep it out, you know, in extreme temperatures for very long.
For sure.
So I was, you know, moving quickly, but in the end, I've gone back and forth. I'm not sure whether that helped me or hurt me. Maybe if I had some big parka on, it would have gone a different direction, but probably not.
For sure. So the guy, you know, we learned a lot about it in retrospect. Drove up in a beat-up minivan. His name is Salah Saladin, 42-year-old guy with 5 kids, a Milwaukee-based high-end art thief, or self-styled.
I'd say self-styled, yeah.
So this guy, and we don't have enough time to really get into how bizarre this man is, but he is a world-class character in himself.
Yeah.
And he, it gets kind of creepy. Like there's some humor to it, but he really cased your life.
Yeah, and I didn't know this for a long time. It took me many months to piece together what had actually happened, mostly because I stayed completely silent and out of the investigation and didn't do a lot of interviews until they were done with what they had to do. But yeah, there was and to this day, not a lot of people know that there was a real stalking aspect to it. In the end, it's amazing to think that he planned this for 3 or 4 years, you know, and he would have been better off just taking my wallet, you know.
Right.
That's not an invitation, by the way. But I mean, he was good at you know, details like where I lived and some of my routines, which fortunately change every day. But he wasn't, and he was good at stealing something singular and unique, but had no idea, I think, of what to do with it.
Right.
As no one would, and that's the reason that they're never stolen.
Right.
You know?
So he took the violin. He's kind of come up with a fog of different claims of why he took it and sort of why he didn't have a good plan of what to do with it. Because you can't just, you can't, so he said there might be some Asian crime syndicate that he was
one
working
of them,
for,
yeah, there might have been.
which doesn't seem very believable.
Was completely nonsense.
But what did he end up doing with it?
He put it in an attic of an abandoned house on the south side, which is totally logical, right? I mean, where else would you put it? I mean, none of his stories ever made any sense, and it was in a way it was a clue to a lot of the law enforcement people that these were not exactly high-end criminals.
For sure.
You know, I mean, I know how, it wasn't like this had never occurred to me. And I know how I would have stolen it. And that's not how it happened, you know?
So you weren't in cahoots with him?
No. Although actually, it's interesting you bring that up, because early on there were people, especially online, who kind of trolled me, and they sort of somehow thought that the owner and I were really involved.
Wow.
Because it was so bizarre that nobody could, and we shut that down pretty quickly, as did the MPD.
So it was only about a week or so.
It was 9 days later, yeah.
They found the violin, he was arrested. I do think this is sort of...
He was not arrested right away.
Sure.
They found the violin, he was taken into custody and almost immediately let out on bail, which really didn't make me feel that great.
Absolutely,
you know?
he's walking around.
Yeah.
He did wrap the violin in the blanket that he brought his son home in, And then in that same suitcase,
Well, it
he
was a
had-
blanket. I don't know if it was his son's. That's what he
said.
Yeah.
He was very self-aggrandizing through the whole. So I see some puzzled looks in the crowd. That's because the story is pretty
It's
puzzling.
like a Coen Brothers movie. I mean,
Right.
really,
It's- And then he also put his ID, like his driver's license, in the suitcase with the
yeah.
violin.
I mean, it's.
Just in case there was any.
I mean, can you make
doubt
that up?
of-
Seriously, there's the FBI art crimes guy that goes up to this attic, and the whole house is empty, and it was unlocked actually. And he went up there, and there's the violin and both bows, by the way, which are also quite valuable. And the violin was wrapped in this blanket, and there were a few other personal effects in there, and his driver's license.
So
Yeah. I think that look was exactly my reaction.
Well, and I think what's interesting is this story, there's so much comedy in it. When we spoke about it, and I'd read a bunch about it,
Yeah.
and we spent time together, the fact that you're a person that was violated in so many ways was maybe not as clear to me in the stories. Like, it's easy to get caught up in the absurdity of all of it.
Yeah.
It's kind of humorous in a dark way. So can you just share a little bit now, it's 4 years in the past, so not too far in the rearview mirror, how this story has sort of changed your life?
Well, I think anybody that goes through some kind of traumatic experience or experiences a violent crime, or endures something like that, there is a certain violation, and it just jars you into thinking a different way. It's really traumatizing in a lot of ways, and you're sort of in a fog for a while. Some people never come out of it, and it's a real mixture of emotions. I mean, I think it took about a year before I really, the magnitude of what had happened, as well as the singularity of what had happened, really dawned on me, because it took me that long, first of all, to kind of just, I think, stabilize in a certain way. Some people think I'm really still not very stable. But also just to get the details of the crime itself, So it just changes you as a person, I think, when you have some act of violence that you have to somehow get through. I was really determined to keep going, and I did not want this to be something that was going to end my career or be a negative beyond what it obviously was. It was really important for me to keep playing. In fact, a week later or something like that, I was going stir crazy because I was doing all these crazy things that I never thought I would do in my life, like take lie detector tests and have people on my lawn from news organizations or meeting cops in parking lots, and I mean it was crazy, And so finally, I just was going to play, and stuff surfaces to this day,
Absolutely.
But I think if you pay attention, there's always something good that comes out of it, and even if it's something as simple as seeing that thing in my house every day and being even more thankful for being able to use it.
For sure.
Then there's all the security stuff, which I won't go into.
The violin is at an undisclosed location
it's in
currently,
an
right?
undisclosed location.
It's not
That's
here.
the running
in case
joke.
of you guys are getting any funny ideas.
Yeah, there's a keyboard though.
Is it a Stradivarius?
Yeah, no.
So if anybody in the audience has any questions for Mr. Almond, I'm sure there are probably a million, because it is an incredible, fascinating story. And the more you learn about it, the more questions you should have. So yes, let's get a question here.
So what was the first piece that you played once you were reunited with your instrument, and what was your initial emotional state?
It was kind of a poignant moment because I had gone away to play some concerts out of state when they found the violin. So if you remember, there was a giant press conference and all this stuff, and I wasn't there because I was on a plane coming back from these concerts where Ed Flynn had called me and said, hey, we found your violin. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I came back immediately and went right from the airport to where the violin was, and it was just me and the owner and the violin in this house. And we kind of looked at each other, and she said, it's back there. We're still very close, and had been through a lot in 9 days. And I went back and looked it over, and I think I played some Bach or something, maybe a minute, that's it. And then I got in the car and drove home with it and started practicing because we had a concert that was scheduled 2 days later. So it was a really surreal experience. We took a couple photos, you know, and but it was just the three of us. And it was quite emotional, but I fortunately had something else to do a couple days later, so I couldn't get too caught up in that.
Another quick question.
I'm just curious as to how they knew it was in that attic.
How the law enforcement eventually found it? There was quite a bit of negotiating that went on. It was clear that there were two perpetrators and many, many days of interrogations, and he led them down all kinds of different avenues until they finally came to a plea bargain. That's what it was about. And the goal was to get the violin back in good condition, not damaged. That was our biggest fear, was that he not only knew what he had, he'd clearly targeted it, but that they were going to damage it somehow. So that's why he didn't get 60 years.
So there's
a lot less.
There's a documentary film being made about it named Plucked.
It's called Plucked.
It's a great name.
Yeah.
Coming out soon.
I don't know if it's coming out soon. It's good. It's supposed to be at Sundance in the fall, from what I hear,
For sure.
or it's submitted. And there's been a lot of interest in it, both from Milwaukee Film Festival and a bunch of other places.
So if you felt like you want to know a lot more about this story, there is currently a lot more out there,
Yeah.
and actually it requires a lot of piecing together. Soon there might be a bigger document of it.
Mm-hmm.
But Frank, thank you for walking us back through this.
Thanks.
And now, round of applause for.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we're going to now see a video produced by Jordan Hahn from Epic Creative of the future home of the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra.
Yay!
And absolutely, where you're going to be with
Yay.
the violin and everything. And many stories will be played on that stage. And let's see the video now. And take a second.
We're in the Grand Theater on West Wisconsin Avenue here in Milwaukee, a building that has been empty since 1995 and soon will be refurbished and added onto as the future home for the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. I'm standing in the lobby of the Grand Theater, one of the best examples of Art Deco architecture in Milwaukee. But the most interesting piece to me right now is this incredible Gantt chart of colored sticky notes our general contractor, C.D. Smith, has put together. I wish I could get my son to plan his homework assignments this way. We might actually get some things done. The theater was built in 1930 by the Warner Corporation, and the architects, the brothers Rapp and Rapp, so it's fondly referred to as a Rapp and Rapp theater. So this is one of my favorite places in the building. This is the balcony overlooking the historic lobby. It's pretty neat. Maybe this could be our hall of mirrors, like we're in Versailles. This is going to be a place where I think a lot of people are going to gather and take it all in. So it's possible there were minimalistic vaudeville shows on this stage. However, this theater was built right at that point where sound became part of movies all the time. The theater that existed here before the Grand Theater was called the Iron Butterfly, and that theater, I believe, had quite a lot of vaudeville in it. But for the most part, the Grand Theater was a grand movie palace. So the room has fantastic acoustics. The orchestra played back in this space in 2001. The acoustics right now are a little bit weird because we've pulled all the seats out at this point during the project. So there's a gigantic open space with concrete floors, and there's an exhaust fan going, thank God. So I'll play a few notes for you, and it's going to be a little bit more reverberant than it would be in the future, but just give you an idea of the size of the space. Now we're standing in the expensive seats. This is going to be our box seats up here on the other side of this temporary wall that was put in when the Marcus Corporation split the theater into upstairs and downstairs. If you take a look down here, you can see a tremendous amount of detail work on the walls and the ceiling. It's really amazing the amount of effort that went into making a room that was essentially dark all the time for movies look great. Not only will you get the historic feeling of a theater built in the 30s and all of that ambiance, but with all the additional construction on the sides, you're going to have the amenities of the 21st century. So the coat check and the bathroom and the bar and all of those things, the box office, will be as modern as possible. But when you sit in your seat, you may feel like you've gone back in time. And Milwaukee really loves their old things. Milwaukee loves to celebrate the history of the city and the repurposing of old buildings, and to really are very, very nostalgic about our past. This is the biggest move the Milwaukee Symphony's made since the birth of the orchestra some 59 years ago. Our programming has grown, our organization has grown, and it's time for us to move out and have our own home where we control our destiny.
Welcome back to the Radio Milwaukee stage. It's going to be exciting to go see a concert there in very shortly, actually. They're cooking right now on the renovation. And we are joined on stage by Chris Flieller and John Maclay. Welcome, guys.
Hello. Thank you.
Chris is from In Tandem Theater, and John is from First Stage. And we kind of tasked them with coming up with a fascinating story of something that they just pulled off by the skin of their teeth from their long careers in theater. And Chris, actually, you didn't have to go back too far to come up with something that was pretty remarkable and unusual.
A couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely. So you guys did a run of the Fantastics from April 26th to May 20th.
Yeah.
And you're going to tell a story from that last night.
So we closed on Sunday, May 20th at 2 p.m. It was a full house. It had been a great run. And a very old lady came to see the show. She was 94 years old, and she got two of her friends from church to drive her to the theater because she really wanted to see the show, so she bought their tickets. And she was very excited. She came in a walker, so we already had a seat picked out for her right in the front row. And she got there about, 1:30-ish for the 2 o'clock show, and got settled in, and at about 1:45 or so, she began to lose consciousness. One of my ushers saw this and got the house manager over, and the house manager called 911, and the usher sat with her and held her hand and kept her head kind of up to, but she was starting to go. So the EMTs got there at about 5 to 2 and started working on her right away. We got everybody out of the theater and into the lobby. We got our piano player playing some more music to keep people kind of cheered up and distracted while the EMTs worked on her. And about 15 minutes later, maybe like 10 after 2, unfortunately, they saw the DNR bracelet. And they had to call her. So, yeah. So then we were faced with a little bit of a dilemma, because this is something I did not know. When a person has any kind of an event like that, and the EMTs can get them stable and get them out the door and to the hospital, whatever happens after that is moot, basically, to where they were. When they expire, then protocols have to be followed. So the police had to be called. They had to make a full report. They had to talk to us as owners of the theater. They had to talk to the friends. They had to find and try and notify next of kin. Then the medical examiner has to come and pronounce the person a second time, put the toe tag on, and all that kind of stuff, make their own report. And this can take a while. This can take hours, depending upon what kind of a busy day everybody's having in other sections of the city. So we went to the audience, and we didn't, at this point, we weren't quite sure that she had expired, but we knew this was going to be a while. So we said, we talked to the audience in the lobby. We said, if we did the show at 6 o'clock, how many people would come? And many people raised their hands. And we said, okay, we're going to go talk to the, first we went to the cast, and we said, this is the situation. We think she's gone. It's going to be a long wait. Can you guys wait and do the show at 6 o'clock? And thank goodness, everybody but the harpist for the show could come back at 6 and do a show. The harpist had another gig that night, so she had to go. Said, well, we can do the show with just piano, so we'll do it. And we went to the crowd and said, and they were game, and we said, we'll be glad to offer refunds to anybody who can't make it, and the rest of you that can come back and see the show. So thereby, we started the process of attending to Elizabeth and her final needs. And I sat with her friends for a very long time, had a marvelous conversation with them, learned a lot about her life. I'm not going to use her last name, but her name was Elizabeth. She was 94 years old. She'd been an occupational therapist here in the Milwaukee area for decades before she retired. She was living independently at Alexian Village. She was a feisty old thing, and she had a great kind of sense of humor and joie de vivre when she barreled into our theater and was excited to see the show. She had auditioned for the role of Louisa in The Fantastics decades ago for a community theater in Rockford, Illinois, and she didn't get it. But she volunteered to design costumes for the show, and that's where she grew to love The Fantastics so much. And when she heard about our production and read the reviews, she really wanted to come see it. She was very excited. I do regret that Elizabeth could not have stayed with us through the performance. But when we reconvened at 6 o'clock, after we'd gotten, the medical examiner came and the police came and all that stuff, and we finally, and medical transport has to come then and do their stuff and take her away. They got her out about 20 after 5, right before the 6 o'clock show. I got up before the show, as is per usual, to do my curtain speech, and I told them a little bit about Elizabeth's life and history. And I said that Elizabeth was here because she loved the theater. And I can see no more fitting tribute to her than for us to continue and do this performance for you, and we dedicate it to her. And it was a magical performance. And everybody had such a wonderful time doing it. The audience had a splendid time. The audience, having had just gone through a kind of a collective experience and kind of an upsetting one, they were there to kind of celebrate the show and celebrate her and celebrate themselves being there. And they thoroughly enjoyed the show. It was quite a magical night in the theater, and it was almost like a wake. So that's my story of the unexpected things that can happen in the live theater.
Chris, thank you. I don't have any questions for you. Can I give you a hug? Can we do that? That's my one question.
Is that okay on TV?
Can we do it?
Yeah.
Can we do
It's
this?
okay. Come on.
All right.
Come, bring it in. Come on. Yeah. Go in.
Thanks for sharing that.
You'll be okay.
Oh.
You'll be all right.
So, John, if you do a good enough job,
Then we won't kill you.
give you a hug.
My story seems really trivial now.
Well, let me set you up.
Please.
So, John has a story with a different tone to it. It's going to be a little.
I hope so.
Yeah. So it is back in the January of 2005 at the opening of the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center, where we did our last episode of this show. And the maiden voyage of the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center was going to be a play by First Stage Children's Theater.
Not quite.
Sorry.
So two things are going on. We were moving from the Marcus Center into the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center. So we were days away from opening programming, most of which was, for First Stage was Academy, which I was overseeing at the time as the director of the Academy. But we were still producing plays at the Marcus Center. So we were days away from entering the Youth Arts Center, but also it was the day before opening of a play called The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle.
All right.
So should I just go?
Go for it.
Great. So we were sort of crammed in, ready for the big move, and so I was sitting at a computer cart in the artistic director, Jeff Frank's office, and it was 10 in the morning, and our first audiences were coming for the show, and I was just obsessed professionally with the opening of the building, so I knew nothing about this play. I've never known less about a play that was happening at First Stage. And it was directed by Jeff's old mentor, Zan Johnson, this great man. And it's a story of a young girl who books passage on a boat over the Atlantic. And the boat is led by, we learn to be a fairly terrible guy named Captain Jaggery, our antagonist. And while she's on the boat, there's a mutiny against him for past bad acts. He had cut off a sailor's arm, who they've smuggled on board, and they're gonna have this mutiny and take over and put him on trial. Anyway, and I have nothing to do with it, and it's great. And it's 10 in the morning, and at noon, where our first audience is coming, and the phone rings. And Jeff answers the phone, and he's, we'll call you back. And he says, so that was Mark Metcalf. And Mark Metcalf, who's a celebrity, been in a lot of films and TV, and ran a restaurant in Mequon for a while, was playing this Captain Jaggery, and he called to let us know that he had no voice, and it would be impractical for him to do the show. And the understudy that we had at that time was no one. And so we went through a series of things we might do, ranging from canceling the show, which we hate to do, to what we decided to do. And what we decided to do, Jeff said, here's what will happen. Jeff said, in a really noble thing for an artistic director to do, he said, I'm going to go on at noon with a script in hand, in costume. And I will read all the lines, and I'll have an ear prompter so the director can tell me where to go. And also give me my lines for the scenes when I need to put down the gun, pick up a rifle, and shoot someone. I said, great, what am I going to do? He's like, oh, you're going to learn the play so you can go on at 7 as though you've been rehearsing the whole time. Great, I'll do that. So I go in, I watch the show, I watch Jeff with this ear prompter, and it's really noble, but he gets through it, and it's fine, and I am terrified. There's no way I can do this, right? But, you know, there's something ultimately emboldening about really low expectations. Like, I figured all I have to do as an understudy is as long as the show happens, as long as you actually say all the words and you don't destroy the show, it's a wild success and you're a hero. So by about 5 o'clock, I felt like I had learned all the lines. You know, it was a 75-minute show. I had my 7 scenes. I didn't have any costume changes, really. I entered from the same spot all the time, mostly. I had it mapped out. There was just one line I couldn't learn, and it was my first line. And I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So we get to 6:30, and I've got it figured out. I only have one bit of offstage business. There's a scene where I get whipped in the face, and I've got to put on this crazy prosthetic wound, but I know how to do that. That's laid out. Got my scenes laid out. And then I think, oh, there's a young person in this show. This is her first audience. She must be freaking out. She's going to have to do this play with someone completely new. Her name was Eva Balistreri, who's now a 20-something amazing professional actor. So I go to see her to just exude confidence about how well this is going to go, which I do not believe to be true. But I go and I said, hey, Eva. She's like, hey, pretty exciting, huh? This is going to be awesome. Let's do this. And I'm like, oh, I guess you're fine. First stage kids under pressure are really impressive. So we get to the play, and it starts, and some stuff happens. I've got a little time, and I enter, and I'm above the scene, and I've got this first line, and this is why I can't learn it. It's all nautical instructions to the crew, and I don't sail. This is like a foreign language. I have no context, I have no subtext, I don't know. To this day, I couldn't tell you what those words are. It's like, half sail, the jibber jabber, I don't even know. And I get to it, but I feel like I've memorized the order of the words, even if they're nonsense to me. And I get out on stage, and I realize I have no idea what this line is. And so I do what a smart actor does. I look at the actor next to me, and instead of saying my line, I say, first mate, take charge. And he looks up at me like, I don't know your line. So he just starts pointing at people. And the sailors, fortunately and unfortunately, the sailors in the play are good friends of mine. And one of them is Jim Fletcher, who just looks up at me like, oh, boy, you don't even know your first line. This is going to be a nightmare. So, but after I get to that line, I'm pretty good. I actually know my lines. And I'm doing pretty well. And the lines are all coming out, and I'm getting more and more confident. And I get to this scene where Tom Reed, who's the guy with his arm cut off, comes out. And Tom's playing a bunch of parts, but this is his good part, where he's going to come out and he's going to give this really long, heroic speech about vengeance and justice. And then at the end of this long, beautiful speech, I shoot him, and he falls overboard. But what actually happened was he came out, he opened his mouth to talk, and I shot him. And there was I didn't have time to learn his lines. I learned he comes out, he talks, I shoot. That's what I learned. And it was a really genuine moment among the actors. Like, those characters were really surprised that I shot him. And Tom was like, and falls overboard. I think in some ways glad to get to leave. And so then we get to the next beat of business I have, which is there's a whipping going on, and Charlotte Doyle goes in to stop it, and then I go in to stop her, and I get whipped across the face, and I run off howling. And I go to my dressing room, and I put this gross wound on, and now I just terrifying. And this is where my character becomes unhinged, and I really know the play well, and I come out, and I'm just rolling. And at some point, I'm like, I'm actually acting now. I'm free. It doesn't matter. And it's really going well. I'm like, this is one of the best things I've ever done in my life. And then the play's over. And it happened, and it was great. And I am sure at this moment that I'm the greatest actor ever. Like, this was his Herculean thing that I've done. It's so amazing. And now we have the curtain call, and I'm walking backstage to the curtain call. And all of my friends, these actors, they're laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? And Jim Fletcher comes over to me, Fletch, and he puts his hand on me. He's like, oh, man, you were doing so well. We didn't want to tell you, but that scar is on the wrong side of your face. And I'm crestfallen because, of course, I looked in the mirror, and I'm like, that's what it looks like, because apparently I don't know how a mirror works. Right. And I'm crushed. I'm like, oh, I messed that up? And he's like, no one noticed. We've just been here the whole time. Like, nobody would ever notice that. So we go out, we take our bows, we have a talk back. Does anyone have any questions? A 10-year-old boy in the front row. Yeah, that scar is on the wrong side of his face.
That's not a question.
At which point, the managing director, founder of the company, Rob Goodman, just bursts into hysterical laughter. The greatest thing that he ever got to see. So, it's okay. It's fine. The play's over. Everyone's being very nice. Mark comes back the next day, and he does a Friday night's show. He does Saturday night's show. He's starting to feel a little ragged. So they come to me, and they're like, well, could you do Sunday? I'm like, well, yeah, now. Do all you want now. 24 hours notice feels like a real gift. Yeah. So I do the 2 shows. I know what I'm doing. It's really fun. And as we're walking off stage, someone turns back, and Bo Johnson, one of the sailors, breaks his hand. He hits something and breaks his hand, and I walk off stage, and the stage manager says, guess what part you're playing Tuesday? And so now we have understudies at our theater. They're well-trained, they're prepared, they're ready to go, and I never have to do that again. All right. And that's the end of my
Thank you. So rather than a hug, do you want to do a low 5?
Sure.
All right. Thank you, John. So we're now getting close to the end of the show. Chris is now going to perform for us a song from the Fantastics.
I thought it was fitting.
Yep, so we're going to hear Try to Remember from Schmidt and Jones, and Matt will be accompanying him. This is from the Fantastics.
A little intro. There's a curious paradox that no one can explain. Who understands the reason for the reaping of the grain? Or why spring is born out of winter's laboring pain? Or why we must all die a bit in order to grow again? Try to remember the kind of September slow and oh so mellow. Try to remember the kind of September when grass was green and grain was yellow. Try to remember the kind of September when you were a tender and callow fellow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Try to remember when life was so tender that no one wept except the willow. Try to remember when life was so tender that dreams were kept beside your pillow. Try to remember when life was so tender that love was an ember about to billow. Try to remember, and if you remember, then follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, although you know the snow will follow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember, without a hurt, the heart is hollow. Deep in December, it's nice to remember the fire of September that made us mellow. Deep in December, our hearts will remember and follow.
Thanks again, Chris. That does it for the second season of MKE Arts Live. I want to thank Megan McGee from Ex Fabula, Frank Almond, Chris and John. Thank you to Radio Milwaukee, to Epic Creative for making this happen, and of course to the United Performing Arts Fund for their support. I'm Adam Carr, and we will be back in September.